We thank you for joining us this morning. Let's put our hands together and sing out, He is able. He is able to save, He is able to keep, He is able to satisfy. My God is able, abundantly able, all of my needs to supply. He is able to save, He is able to keep, He is able to satisfy. My God is able, abundantly able, all of sing, He is able. He is able to save, He is able to keep, He is able to satisfy. My God is able, abundantly able, all of my needs to supply. Jake Lamb, why don't you open us up this morning in prayer?
God, good to have you all out this morning. We appreciate everyone coming out to be a part of this. We want to continue in our study called Blameless, Thoughts on Christian Character. And we've been working through a number of character issues. And the point is to examine yourself in light of these things. Some of us are strong in some points, strong in others, weak in others. And so we've got to look at these life issues, these issues that will define who we are and how we treat people and how we relate to God. And it's such far-reaching. It's such a far-reaching topic, character. What we are in our inner man. And so we looked at honesty, we looked at humility, loyalty, authenticity, character issues. These are things that Peter describes as virtues. This is virtuous living. This is living a life worth living. And so we've addressed all of these issues. This morning, we're going to talk about self-control, which is very closely related to what Pastor Smart addressed in Serious Men. We hadn't discussed it. He was moved by the Holy Spirit, and so clearly we're on to something. When I hear overlapping ideas and thoughts, it means we're addressing something that needs to be addressed. So we need Josiah to give us our regular 1 Thessalonians 5:23 to 24, which is our basic text for our study of Blameless. And then let me just get a couple of other scriptures. Hopefully we'll get to them. 2 Timothy 3:1-3. Nico, Juan, get me 1 Corinthians 7:5 and 9. So that's all I'm going to give this morning. We could very easily get into some of the other stuff, but that is probably as far as we'll get this morning. We'll see. All right, 1 Thessalonians 5:23 to 24. Josiah's got it. Yeah, we're all set.
May God Himself, the God of peace, sanctify you through and through. May your whole spirit, soul, and body be kept blameless at the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ. He who calls you is faithful, and He will do it.
Okay, it's a great text to have memorized and to repeat to yourself every day of your life. God, I need help to be blameless and to be sanctified, spirit, soul, and body. All of our life is affected by the process of sanctification and the way we let God change our inner landscape. So this morning we're going to pick up the issue of self-control. Harry Truman said, in reading the lives of great men, I found that the first victory won was over themselves. Self-discipline with all of them came first. So his understanding of how you get to greatness, how you get a life that is able to accomplish something, is you have to rein yourself in. Let's think about the definition of self-control. 2,400 years ago, Xenophon, who was a Greek philosopher, put it this way: self-control may be defined as moderation in all things healthful, total abstinence from all things harmful. So in other words, good things still have to be controlled, right? Thanksgiving has to be controlled, right? That's a good thing. It's a healthy thing. But it has to be done in moderation, or you will find yourself in great pain. Total abstinence from all things harmful. Anything that would hurt you, hurt those around you, hurt your reputation, hurt your spirituality, anything that would cause harm in your life, you just stay away from it completely. And he says the ability to do this, the ability to put good things in check and to completely do away with evil things is self-control. Someone said that self-discipline or self-control is choosing to do what is right when you feel like doing what is wrong. Choosing to do what is right when you feel like doing what is wrong. But that isn't totally accurate, because sometimes it's not a question of choosing between right and wrong. Sometimes it's a question of choosing right or better, more excellent, which is more difficult. You can skate through life doing just enough, but that won't ever make you an excellent person. And you'll never attain excellence that way. There's always that percentage. Just think about athletes. There's always that percentage that take it up a notch. And to get there, they have to exercise the highest degree of self-control. So self-control isn't easy, and it's not what most of us gravitate to, but it is essential if you're going to develop the kind of character that reflects the nature of Christ. Someone said self-discipline or self-control is described as knowing you can do something, but you won't do it if it's wrong or harmful or will draw you away from your desired end. I listened to a very excellent book. It's worth listening to. I can't remember the author's name off the top of my head, but it's called A Boy Named Lucky. And he was born with severe autism, extreme. And in all the tests, he was so off the scale, they didn't even know how to deal with it. And this was before autism was a thing. This was when people were just starting to become aware of the issues. So his father, again, because he didn't have a lot of reference points for the problem, he decided, no, I'm not going to allow this to be classified in our thinking or in my son's thinking as a handicap. This isn't going to be treated in such a way that he gets off easy because he has autism. We're not going to raise him that way. We are going to expect of him what we would expect from any child. We're going to help him. We're going to be there for him. We're going to teach him. We're going to instruct him. But we're going to raise him in a way where he's got to live up to expectations. This man with severe autism became an enormous success in broadcasting and conservative news, talk radio, all of these things. Again, I can't even remember his name. I think I've heard of it in a couple of contexts. But what's amazing is that that is not the industry you would expect someone with these kinds of developmental problems to excel in. And yet he has become a huge success. And one of the principles, and the interesting thing about the book is it's filled with life principles and how you need to face life's challenges. One of the things that his father taught him was that the shortest way to get to where you're going is a straight line. So anything that would draw you away from where you want to go, he was keen on setting a goal. And anything that diverts you from that goal is a bad idea. Well, there's so many diversions. There's so many things that would draw you away from becoming a powerful man of God, a powerful woman of God, someone who is able to influence others for eternity. There are so many things that would draw you away from that goal. Self-control is what keeps you on the straight line. It's the ability to look at the way your life is going and say, am I getting closer to what I want to become? All of us want to become Christ-like, whether you want to or not. You want to become Christ-like. That's the whole idea of Christianity. That's the whole idea of being a disciple of Christ. And please don't fall prey to the common assumption that there are disciples and there are Christians. That's a fallacy. You're either a disciple or you're not. Jesus didn't look at it like, there's these different tiers of followers. If you're going to follow me, what does he say? If you're going to follow me, you're going to deny yourself, pick up your cross, and get in line. So this idea of self-control is critical to attaining Christ-likeness. That's what self-control will accomplish for you. If you want to become a great musician, you have to practice for hours a day. When everybody else is out playing, when everybody else is out doing what they want to do, you're doing something that at times isn't enjoyable or pleasant at all. But at the end of the day, you're able to play an instrument with virtuosity while the rest of them are working at McDonald's. Right? It's a difference in having a goal or just living your life very loose, very casual, doing it however you want to do. So we've all heard the story of Reynold III. He was a 14th century duke in what is now Belgium, and he was morbidly obese. He was massive. His Latin nickname was Crassus, which means fat. That's what they called him, Crassus. And his younger brother, Edward, revolted against the older brother's rule, captured him, and put him in a room that he had specially built. And it was a room that had windows. It had a little smaller door than normal, but any average person could get in and out of it. The doors were never locked. There were no bars on the windows. And Edward told Reynold that I will give you your kingdom back. You can have everything that you've lost when you can come out through the door. And then what Edward did every day was send him the finest food he could find. And he would give him all of the king's dainties. And for 10 years, Reynold stayed locked in his room because he couldn't lose weight. All he had to do was exercise self-control and he could have been king again. But he spent 10 years in that room and only got out when his brother Edmund was killed in battle, and they let him out. And then he died within a year because of health issues. So think about that. Here's a man whose entire life could have been changed with a modicum of self-control. And yet, and strong motivation, good reason to do it, but he never did it. I didn't read the whole article, I just read the headline. That's usually what I do. So I just read headlines. And there was a football player that was booted from a $29.4 million contract yesterday because he didn't make the team meeting. You can't just get your sorry butt out of bed and go to the team meeting. You're going to lose $29 million. Pete Rose was the all-time baseball leader. He has records that still stand. 4,256 hits, 3,562 games played, 14,000 career at-bats, 3,215 singles. He owned three World Series rings, 3 batting titles, 1 Most Valuable Player award, 2 Gold Gloves, Rookie of the Year, made 17 All-Star appearances in 5 different positions. Nobody's ever played ball like Pete Rose. He got booted out of baseball because he had a gambling addiction that he couldn't rein in. And when he was caught, he was removed because it's illegal to be a player on a team and bet on the games. And years and years went by. He was denied Hall of Fame status again and again and again because he wouldn't quit betting. All he had to do, stop betting. We live in Vegas. All you got to do is stop gambling, your life will change. Right? But you're addicted. You're addicted to the lights. You're addicted to the possibility that you're going to get rich, which nobody does in Vegas except the casinos. And the ones who do, the ones who actually hit the jackpot, invariably end up gambling it away because they have no control over their passions and their desires. Bill Clinton could have been a great president. He really did some remarkable things. He reduced the national debt by $363 billion. That was without Elon Musk. That was just using common sense, looking at where the money was going and reining it in. He accomplished the largest 3-year debt paydown in American history. Of any president in history, he paid down the debt more than any other president. He converted the largest budget deficit in history at that point. Now we're at 33 trillion or something like that. So we're completely off the hook. But back then it was 290 billion. And he converted that to 237 billion surplus. He was president over one of the longest economic expansions in American history. It lasted 115 months. It's pretty much unheard of. 22 million new jobs. But whenever Bill Clinton is mentioned, he's not remembered for any of that. He's remembered for Monica Lewinsky. That's as soon as you hear Bill Clinton, you think Monica Lewinsky. Here's a man who, unable to rein in his passions, could have been one of the greatest seated presidents in history. He really could have. He had an amazing political ability, but he couldn't stop chasing women. And now he's deeply embroiled in the Epstein situation. They want him to testify before Congress. He's trying to avoid that because we all know that there's a picture hanging in Epstein's house of Bill in a blue dress. So here's a man who could have actually been something great, but he's not. He's not remembered as a great president. He's remembered as a man who couldn't control his appetites. You have to be able to rein in your appetites. And the lack of self-control is evident everywhere we look today. Road rage. People die because you're upset that you cut them off in traffic. Social networking with the endless vitriol. No restraint whatsoever. I'm just going to bag on you. I'm going to say anything I want because I'm a long ways away from you. So I don't have to face you. I don't have to look at you. I don't have to deal with consequences. So I can say anything I want. And that is the way people think today. Unfortunately, it spills into just the social contract and everything that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. We watch people have meltdowns and not able to control their emotions, not able to control their actions, just letting it fly, saying anything that they want to say, doing anything that they want to do. And you end up with violence, you end up with insanity on every side. Amen. You end up with alcoholism, drug abuse, opioid addictions, because no self-control. Unable to say no to the desires of the flesh. Marital breakdown, because two people won't rein it in and work out the problems. They're going to fight until they can't stand each other anymore. And then it's going to end in divorce. Family breakdowns. It just goes on and on and on. You can trace everything we're talking about to one degree or another back to the issue of you won't control yourself. You won't rein in your emotions. You won't deal with life as it is. Right? This is what Pastor Smart was talking about. Growing up, maturity is mastering the ability to deal with life as it is, not as you wish it was. And that's the capacity to address problems that you don't really want to address. You'd rather avoid them. You'd rather stay away from them. But you can't. You got to deal with the realities, and that is the consequence of controlling your emotions, controlling your mind, bringing it into obedience to Christ, and letting Him direct your paths. Aaron.
I remember before I got saved, it was almost like the early years of social media and things like that. And the people who couldn't control themselves and would type random things on Facebook. In LA, we used to call them keyboard warriors, because you were tough online, but in person, you weren't much. And I've seen people put them, like, literally write a check that they couldn't cash,
right,
and get themselves put in big trouble, sometimes death or in prison. And I brought that same mentality of not being able to control myself into my salvation, and here for a number of years, to the point, and I had to confess what I was doing. And you told me, you said, you got caught playing fast and loose. Now you need to go and fix what you've wrecked. And now it was a part of what Pastor Smart was saying, my refusal to grow up when I was here before I had to go to Mexico. And like I said in morning prayer, I was literally a boy with man responsibilities, but refusing to take care of said responsibilities, refusing to grow up until I was faced with it in Mexico. You have no choice. This is what you are going to do. You know what I mean? Oh, you thought life was hard. Go wait in line for 3 hours and then cross over and then work for 8 hours and then have to cross back into another country. And it was like God forced me to accept my role as a man and grow up, because I refused to do so when I was here, and just didn't want to grow up until you had no other choice.
Yeah, which is very often where we get our education, in self-discipline. Self-discipline invariably is the product of imposed discipline, which is where, the absence of fathers has created havoc, because it's our fathers who taught us how to suck it up and do what had to be done. Rein it in. Stop it. When a mother says stop it, it just sounds like, it doesn't even register. Stop it. Stop it, Junior, please. Don't do that. And all that does is inspire us to come up with worse. But when Dad says stop it, you stop it instantly. You freeze, mid-motion. Because you know that the next thing isn't going to be stop it, it's going to be pain. That teaches you to rein it in. That teaches you, that's an imposed discipline, that teaches you self-discipline. I can control my action. I can control what I'm doing because there's a power that I have to answer to, which is fundamental to Christianity. We're going to look at this a little bit more when we get down to it, but the truth of the matter is, anything God requires of you, you can do. You can stop the sin. You can stop whatever the sin is. You can stop. And what helps you to do that is the fear of the Lord. Is the realization that one day all your nonsense is going to have to be accounted for. You're going to stand before a righteous judge, and he's not going to be cutting you breaks or letting you off on technicalities. He's going to be holding you to account for the way you've conducted your life. And that has a very profound impact on how you choose to live. Consequences. Self-control. I'm going to rein it in. I don't have the right to just do whatever I want. I don't have the right to think that everybody's got to put up with me. Again, in that book, a boy named Lucky, the father said the world is never going to change for you. You have to change for the world. They're never going to accept you the way you are. You have to recognize where you have to rein things in, where you have to get control. And if you'll do that, then you'll find that you can move forward in life. Question, Scott.
There was this a book I came across. It was called The Way of Men. And he was talking about how historically the man guarded the city gates. He guarded the walls. So if you weren't self-controlled, if you weren't doing what you were supposed to do, there's huge ramifications behind that. But today, you can do anything you want. The stock market still does what it does. The Wi-Fi is still on. The government will take care of you. And the consequence to a man not being a man and not doing what he's supposed to do isn't directly correlated as it was before. And obviously we're here, so it's different. Would you say that if we don't constantly keep ourselves in the mind of, okay, this is a battle, and I am guarding the gates, not physically, but spiritually for my own life, you have to constantly keep yourself in the battle, or I cannot come to morning prayer, and people will still visit. Visitors will still come, and the 180 will still go on, and church will still function. And if we have that mindset, then there's still correlations to that.
Yeah, thank you for the unsolicited insights into how things play out, right? Morning prayer. I don't have to go to morning prayer. I've been thinking about a sermon on morning prayer for a while. I've been thinking about going after it. Because we can say, just as Scott said, well, I don't go to morning prayer, and people are still getting saved. God's still helping people. Good things are happening. How many people don't get saved because you don't come? How much of a greater impact could our lives have if you would develop the discipline of coming to morning prayer? But the discipline of morning prayer means you got to shake off the sheep demon. You got to start your day earlier. You got to do things you don't want to do. And it's much easier just stay in bed, get that extra hour of beauty sleep, which hasn't helped you at all. He's still as ugly as he started. Right? And so it's a question of self-control. Right? Just think about that word, self-control. We're going to be digging into it. Yeah, Sam.
Yeah, you would think that, that when you keep doing things wrong and the consequences come, something would click. But, I've been going to prison for a long time, and these guys, they're Jesse, they're John the Baptist in prison. When they get out, they're Jesse James again. And this goes on and on, over and over. A perfect example is Harold. He had that mentality, for 30 years, in and out, rested, but something finally clicked in his head. Well, why am I suffering these consequences when I can just get right with God and discipline myself to not go in those areas anymore? You know what I mean? With the help of God, a lot of people, like I'm just talking to some guy, he's got this thing about wanting to quit smoking. I said, you can't fight flesh with flesh. It's got to be spirit fighting the flesh. You know what I mean? So a lot of these guys are gonna get out and I'm gonna take care of things, but without the spirit helping you, I think it's a lost cause.
Yeah, we're going to look into that a little bit. Harold, what do you have to say to that?
Well, what dawned on me is that in the Bible, John 5:15, it says, Jesus is talking and said, you can do nothing without me. Light came on.
There you go. Light came on. So a lifetime of doing the same thing over and over and over with the same consequences over and over, and they're unpleasant consequences. But, we have an amazing capacity to get used to unpleasant consequences, right? The classic is Pharaoh, and the plague of frogs has come upon him and his whole country, and you can't eat a piece of bread that doesn't have a frog in it, and you can't go to bed without laying down on frogs. The frogs are so thick that everything is a problem, and Moses says, okay, I can get rid of these frogs for you. He says, when do you want me to do it? And he says, tomorrow. Give me one more night with the frogs. I'm not ready yet to deal with this incredibly difficult situation. Let's take care of it tomorrow. So you get used to unpleasant consequences. Guys get used to incarceration. It's their home away from home. And they just, they can do it standing on their head. At the end of the day, Harold got a revelation that I really can change if I depend on God. So God gives us what we lack in character, which is true of everything we've been talking about as relates to character, honesty. Some people come into the kingdom as pathological liars. They can't talk, they made great politicians. They can't say 3 sentences without throwing a lie in there somewhere. But God helps them. They realize it. The lights come on, as Harold said. The lights come on. You go, no. I don't want to live this way anymore. So you rein in behavior that is wrong. You learn to say no to that. You learn to moderate behavior that isn't necessarily wrong, but you keep it under control. There's nothing wrong with watching football, except if it keeps you out of church. Then there's something wrong with football. There's something wrong with gambling on football. There's something wrong with becoming so addicted to football that it's all you think about. You don't have time for the kingdom. You don't have time for God. This is your thing, right? And you got all the colors on your car, and you wear the jerseys, and you're completely sold out to your team. Your team should be the church. That's the team you want to sell out to. But that takes some self-control to say no to something that isn't. I'm not going to hell because I watch football. No, you're not. You just never accomplish anything worth accomplishing because you have no self-control. You can't say no to things that aren't helpful, that aren't getting you where you want to go. Jake.
Yeah, self-control sounds real easy, when you're thinking about it, just
Yeah, in
don't
theory.
do it. Nancy Reagan,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
say no.
Just say no.
It's like it sounds real easy, but when you consider that self-idolatry is the epicenter of all sin, everything that makes God separate himself from us is self-idolatry, trying to think of yourself more. You realize how much you need self-control in every aspect of your life, like everywhere you're working.
Yep, absolutely. And we're going to be looking at the dynamics of it. But this is something that you can't just ignore because it affects every area of your life. John.
You made a statement. The father told his autistic son, listen, the world's not going to change for you. You have to change for the world. And that struck me because I was like, if somebody said that today to someone with autism, to someone with, I mean, not even just anybody. You're like, if you're like, hey, you know what, the world's not going to change for you. I mean, riot in the street. No, you need to change everything to adapt to me. And it's like, especially my generation lives its entire life going, everybody has to adjust for themselves. Like, it logically doesn't make any sense. If everyone's changing for somebody else, then nobody's even having them change for themselves irregardless. But what do you say, like, to this generation, to, people who say, no, it has to change for me? Like, I get that. I was witnessing to somebody that came to church, and they're like, well, I really don't like the exclusivity of Christ. And I was like, tough. Like, like, I don't either, like, it's not fun, but it's what he says. And like, what do you say to people that are kind of like, no, it needs to change for me? And it's like, no, God has set a standard, and like that struck me. I don't.
Yeah, and you're pointing out one of the difficulties of our current culture. Go back 50, 60 years, nobody believed that the world revolved around me. We all understood I have to conform. And it was truly my generation, the generation of hippie rebellion, that rioted against conformity, that said, no, we're not going to conform to social norms. We're not going to accept the boundaries that make civilization work, which are all rooted in the Bible. They're rooted in Christian perspective. Christian perspective is what tamed the wild beast of mankind. And that's just a fact of history. So the rebellion at its root was a rebellion against God. And as you said, the standards that do exist, whether you like them or not, these standards are never going to change for you because they are truth. They are the real world. And they will never change for you. So people who insist on, no, you have to change for me, are people who will never excel. And ultimately, they will reap what they're sowing. This is why what we're talking about is so critical. Is ultimately, that's going to come back on you. It doesn't matter. Do you want everybody to believe the philosophy of, you're precious and special? Just as you said, if everybody thinks they're special, nobody's special. If I insist that you conform to me, I'm going to run into somebody who insists that you conform to me. That's going to be true of any society. The only way you can avoid it is move up into the hills and disappear and live life however you want. But if you're going to interact with people, you're going to soon realize that they're not going to put up with your nonsense. And this is where parents are failing their children, is they're putting up with their nonsense. And you're going to produce exactly what we're talking about. You're going to produce people who don't know how to relate to other people because as far as they know, the world's supposed to serve me and change to me. That's the definition of narcissism. So, what do you tell people? You tell them, look, good luck with that. Just like you said, it can be a little blunt, but how else do you address it? Good luck with that. That's not going to work. It's not going to work. You're going to run into somebody who wants what they want more than what you want, and you're going to lose the argument and have your head handed to you. So the realities of life do have a way of teaching people who can be taught. But again, as Sam pointed out, sometimes, because we never have this discussion, we never deal with the issue, people go through life mystified by why it doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? Why can't I get a woman to marry me? Well, just look at who you are. Look at the way you treat her, right? These are all the kind of interactions that unless you become self-aware enough to address the problem, it never changes. You're going to have problems all your life. True in marriage. How many times in marriage, it's my way or the highway? Well, it ends up the highway 50% of the time. And the other 50% of the time, both of you are miserable because both of you are insisting on my way or the highway. Marriage is all about unselfing. And to do that, you have to have enormous self-control. You have to bite your lip when everything in you says, now shut up, let it cool off, and then talk about the problem, right? Yeah. Randy.
No, Pastor, we're living in a me generation.
Me.
I and me. And in Marine Corps boot camp, there's one word that's forbidden. That's I. So whenever we were asked anything, I did it, sir. No. I mean, they work you out. They send you to the quarter. They push-ups, mountain climbers, bench and thrust, the whole night. Ask you again. I. No. This recruit. You know, so we were all reduced to nothing and built back up to where it wasn't about me, it was about the core.
Right.
So
the word I had to change to the word we. Right? It's us. It's not me. It's us. That's the definition of society. Society is a bunch of us trying to figure out how to coexist, how to live together. And if you don't figure out self-control, it's not going to play well. Carl.
Yeah, this reminded me of school, public education, this recent part of this discussion. I'm remembering Thomas Sowell is the name that I'm bringing up here. He was kind of forced out of the education arena like in 1980, and I studied finance and accounting in college, and I went in 1982 through 89. Didn't know who he was. His readings should have been required reading in my curriculum with what I studied. I didn't even know who he was.
Right, which is incredible.
And I've studied him a lot. He's written a whole lot of books. So the one of the reasons that they pretty much got him out of there, forced him out, and he found his way. But one of the things that regarding public policy, and it ties in with what you're teaching here, is he had three basic premises with whether something should be done or not. One was, is it good for the public? Two, will it work? And the third one, how much does it cost? You kind of have to center research around those three areas, and if it checks out, then let's go with it. If not, let's not. So a lot of his teaching, a lot of his doctrine was that's the core, and it just kind of ties in with that me, myself, and I type of thing. That's not what's up. That's not the norm. That individual type ruggedness is not what's going to work. Is it good for the public? Will it work? How much does it cost?
Could you imagine?
Add that in.
Yeah, could you imagine where we would be if our government actually believed any of that? Right? But that's not how they function. They're insider traders. They're robber barons. They are criminals. At the end of the day, and I've come to just simply say, well, you know, the only one's going to judge all this is God, because they sure won't judge each other. Right? How many times have you looked at the news and thought, going to arrest that person? Well, don't hold your breath. They're never going to arrest that person. That person has a free ride. But they also have no self-control. So life will catch up with them. And if nothing else will catch up with them, God will catch up with them. You have to rein it in. Dwayne.
What do you think leads to like the breakdown of somebody who is like disciplined and has incredible self-control? Because I kind of like hearing this, I think of like my great uncle who was in Navy SEAL, strict, disciplined person. I could talk to my grandma, I could talk to any of my great aunts and uncles, and they would always say, oh, Keith was disciplined. Keith was the one who was on every single one of us. He kept every single one of us in line. He made sure everyone was doing right. He was in church 24/7. He was this, he was that. And even like my younger years, I even saw that from him. He wasn't like strict with us as the kids or anything like that, but you could see his example. And then all of a sudden, it's like he's back in San Diego and everything. He's fighting with cops. He's suing the police department. He's going crazy and everything like that. He's moved in with us. He's throwing stuff around. It looks like he did a complete 180 of lifestyle. And now I remember when I was back in Detroit a few years ago talking to him, it seems like that old self's kind of come back, like the discipline side, but you can see that it almost, not even say it insultingly, but it looks like he reverted back to acting like just a teenager in that sense.
Yeah. So I believe that may not be impossible, it's incredibly challenging to sustain self-control over the long haul unless God gets involved, unless your life gets surrendered to Christ. That's the missing element for all of us, really. And yes, there are certain personality types that seem to be better suited to self-control than most of us. They seem to have that steel in their spine. However, when you surrender to Christ, you find, and we're going to look at this, but one of the fruit of the Spirit is self-control. So the Spirit brings the dimension that we all lack. And the problem with your uncle is the heart is wickedly deceitful. So you can maintain it, and you can look at your accomplishments, you can look at your discipline and say, man, I live life this way. But along comes something bigger than your self-discipline. And it starts to break down. And what you find is that it's so much easier to give in to what you desire, that quickly replaces the habit of self-discipline. Very quickly. Because it's, look, I got what I wanted and nothing blew up. So I can go down this road, and the next thing you know, the discipline's gone. So it's the Holy Spirit that is like the guardrails on the road, keeps you from driving off the edge. And I think without conversion, without the Spirit of the living God, sooner or later, it always goes off the rails. Yeah. Yeah, Gene.
So, Pastor Lamb, I know this should probably go without saying, but self-control, self-discipline, is it synonymous with self-sacrifice? And is there a balance between self-sacrifice and self-preservation?
Well, first part of the question is I wouldn't say it's the same, because self-sacrifice is actually the next level up. You have to have self-control to be able to live a self-sacrificial life. But self-sacrifice is the surrender of self, self-will, personal profit, advancement, anything you want to put it, whatever context it is. Something that would be in my best interest, I will forsake it for your best interest. I'm doing this as a sacrifice for you. Now, in order to really pull that off, you have to have self-control at work. But self-control does not require self-sacrifice. That's another decision that has to be made. I can live in complete self-control without sacrificing anything, except, my want to. But I don't even have to give that up as long as I keep it under control, as long as I rein it in. So I'm not letting go of my want to. I'm not letting go of me. I'm not letting go of anything. I'm just controlling it, keeping it within the proper bounds. Self-sacrifice is when I've decided I'm going to go beyond and above that, and I'm going to give myself to someone else. Then the second half of the question was, again, there was something else that you said. Oh, the balance. Yeah, the balance. The balance of self-control, again, is simply what's right and what's wrong. There is no question of balance. Okay, so in other words, people will say to you, going to church 3 times a week, that's just over the top. Well, what else would I do? The saints are assembled. They're worshiping the God I serve. Why wouldn't I gather with them? Right? So the idea that there's some balance to that, well, we all tend to tip the scales. Balance really isn't the question. Balance is defined by what's right and wrong. Period. What is good and what is not good. It really does. It's very binary. We don't like binary. We like gray. We like, you can't be so dogmatic. You can't be so definitive. Yes, you can. Gravity is as definitive as anything you know. And you are all subject to it whether you like it or not. That's just reality. Reality really is binary. It's black and white. A produces B. Sooner or later, A produces B. It's the way life is. Josiah.
Question. Would you say that the category of compromise also falls into self-control? So if I say like for instance, there's 3 services a week. If I go to Wednesday service, I won't have to show up on Sunday because I already went. Would you say compromise also falls into that?
Absolutely. So remember what I was talking about earlier. Shortest way to the goal is a straight line. Right? What do I want to be? I want to be like Jesus. What was Jesus like? Well, Jesus was daily in prayer, daily in the synagogues, daily giving himself to the word, daily giving himself to prayer. Anything that gets between me and what I want to become is a question of self-control. No, I'm not going to divert. This is what I'm heading for. And as Pastor Smart talked about in our Serious Men's class, the problem is most of us are not serious about that. I have a quote in here somewhere. Let me find it real quick. It's a good quote. Shucks. It's a great quote. I want to get it right. If most people drove their cars the way they planned their lives, they'd never get out of the driveway. Because most people, as far as their lives go, they don't have a point at the end of the field. Right? He who puts his hand to the plow, takes it off, isn't worthy of the kingdom. Farmers used to pick a point at the end of the field. That's how they got straight furrows. They wouldn't take their eyes off that point. They'd get to the end of the field, they'd turn, they'd pick a point here, and they wouldn't take their eyes off of that. And that's how they got straight furrows. They didn't look down because that would lead them this way and that. They looked at the goal. They looked at the end result. They said, that's what I want. I want to get to that point, and the only way you can get there is a straight line. That's how you get there. Anything else is a diversion. It takes self-control to avoid everything else. So the only way you get where you're going is self-control. Pastor Smart.
You know, I was thinking about what Dwayne was saying earlier with his great uncle. And so I also had an uncle. He was a chief in the Navy. And when he got out of the military, you know, here's a man that was respected, you know, leader. When he got out of the military, he ended his life spiraled. He was homeless, died on the streets of San Francisco. And you look at that, and how does someone function so well? And really part of that, a big part of that in his life, especially without Christ and the Holy Spirit, is environment. And when we look at most disciplined people, there are definitely natural inclinations that people have, but when you look at their life, they just structure their life in such a way with an environment that allows for them to be disciplined, removing the temptations, removing a lot of the distractions. If I want to eat better, I need to remove temptation from my house.
Get rid of the Twinkies.
Get rid of the snacks and some of the things that are unhealthy, because as long as they're there, it allows for an environment that you know, just encourages undisciplined behavior.
Yep.
And so as a Christian, there are certain pre-decisions that we make in advance.
Right.
That I'm going to do this, I'm not going to do this. I need to structure my life with an environment, with accountability, with commitments, with things in my schedule that facilitates a life of discipline and self-control.
Right. So it's imposed discipline leads to self-discipline. The structure of the Navy gave his grandfather, uncle, the capacity to see this is right, this is wrong, this is how I'm going to live, because I have the military code of justice, this is how I have to live. And as long as that's in place, in prison, I'm John the Baptist. Get me out of prison, I'm Jesse James. Right? As long as the imposed discipline is there. The end result that you're looking for in imposed discipline is to embrace it internally, so that you have an internal discipline, which is absolutely true of us, even as Christians. So this is part of what the church is supposed to, a role that the church is supposed to play in our lives, is that accountability to each other. There is a certain structure that defines us as Potter's House Christians. This is our culture, this is our society, and you will feel a certain pressure. I'm not backslidden. You'll feel a certain pressure to get in line. That's not wrong. That's an imposed discipline that helps you learn self-discipline. Pastor Looney, you had a thought, and then we're out of time.
It goes back to what I was always told. Behavior observed is always behavior changed.
Yeah.
So that's a huge part of discipleship.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that's the reality of it.
And what that does, see, is it changes the dynamic of self-control. There's an accountability. I have to rein this in. I have to rein this in.